There comes a moment, a breathtaking, terrifying moment when your uniqueness stops being something he admires and becomes the very thing that shakes him to his core. Let me tell you something raw, something we rarely say out loud. Your uniqueness was never the problem. The real problem was that he never expected you to grow into a woman who owned her voice, her truth, and her direction. He liked you soft. He liked you unsure. He liked you questioning your worth because it made him feel bigger, safer, more in control. But life has a funny way of revealing who we really are when pressure hits your heart. And instead of collapsing, you rose. Instead of shrinking, you expanded. Instead of asking for permission, you walked straight into the life you deserved. And the moment he realized that, that moment changed everything. Because your transformation didn't whisper. It thundered. It made him see himself, really see himself, in ways he had avoided for years. Your clarity highlighted his confusion. Your healing exposed his wounds. Your courage reflected his hesitation. Your growth held up a mirror he never wanted to look into. And that's when fear kicked in. Not fear of you, but fear of what being with a woman like you would require of him. Effort, honesty, accountability, evolution. Your uniqueness didn't terrify him because it was strange. It terrified him because it was powerful. Power demands courage. And he wasn't ready for yours. There's a moment in every woman's story where she stops trying to fit into the small spaces someone else built for her. And when you reach that moment, he felt it instantly. He felt the shift in your energy, in your boundaries, in the way you started carrying yourself like a woman who finally understood her worth. And that shift, it rattled him in places he kept hidden even from himself. Because for so long, he relied on the version of you who doubted her own brilliance. The version of you who apologized for taking up space. The version of you who softened your voice, your dreams, your fire, just to make him comfortable. But that version of you was never meant to be permanent. She was just passing through. She was the chrysalis, the container, the in-between. And when you transformed, when you stepped out of that old skin, he didn't just notice it, he panicked. He saw the rise in your confidence. He watched you reclaim your self-respect. He heard the strength in your no and the calm certainty in your lies. He felt your boundaries land like stones, solid, undeniable, immovable. And suddenly, the power dynamic shifted. Suddenly, the woman who once needed him didn't. Suddenly, the woman who once sought his approval stopped. Suddenly, the woman who used to shrink herself stood tall, and that terrifies a man who is more invested in control than connection. What he didn't expect was this: once a woman finds her voice, she becomes unstoppable. And nothing, absolutely nothing, scares an unprepared man more than a woman who finally recognizes her own power. There's a truth many people refuse to admit: your growth exposes the places where others chose to stay small. And when you began stepping into the fullness of who you are, he started seeing the uncomfortable contrast between your evolution and his stagnation. That contrast didn't just startle him. It threatened every belief he held about himself, because for him, your uniqueness was manageable as long as it stayed quiet, as long as it didn't challenge his comfort, as long as it didn't require him to rise higher. But the moment your light grew brighter, the shadows in his own life became impossible for him to ignore. And instead of rising with you, he recoiled. He hid behind excuses. He masked insecurity with distance. He convinced himself you were too much, when the reality was simple. You had become everything he secretly wished he could be. Your authenticity revealed his emotional laziness. Your courage highlighted his fear of change. Your healing made his unresolved wounds impossible to hide. Your ambition reminded him of the dreams he abandoned. And nothing terrifies a man more than watching a woman grow into a future he has no intention of building for himself. So he tried to minimize you in subtle ways, questioning your choices, doubting your decisions, pretending to be supportive while quietly hoping you'd shrink back to the version of you he understood, the version he could predict, the version he could handle. But growth doesn't reverse. Confidence doesn't shrink back. Unstoppable women don't return to cages they outgrew. and he felt that truth like a storm he couldn't outrun. In that moment, he didn't just realize your uniqueness. He realized his limitations. Here's the part that cuts. Deep the moment he realized you were unstoppable, he saw it in the quietest yet loudest ways, not in a dramatic confrontation, not in a fight, but in the effortless way you carried your presence. The way your confidence didn't seek permission. The way your joy wasn't negotiable. The way your boundaries weren't flexible to accommodate his insecurities. That's when the realization hit him like a cold, unrelenting wind. He could no longer shape you, contain you, or control you. And let's be honest, control is the safe place for men who aren't ready to evolve. They want comfort, predictability, a version of you that won't challenge their fragile ego. But you became the storm, the fire, the undeniable force that demanded authenticity and respect, and watching you unapologetically powerful left him exposed. It left him feeling the weight of his own inadequacies. Your laughter, your ambition, your clarity. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about you stepping fully into the life he could never give you, because he was too afraid to face the work within himself. He couldn't understand that your strength wasn't a threat. It was a mirror reflecting his fear, his hesitation, and his choice to remain small. And in that reflection, he saw the truth he had avoided for years. He wasn't ready for a woman who refuses to settle, compromise her worth, or dim her light. This is why your uniqueness terrifies him. Not because you're strange, not because you're loud, not because you shine, because you're unstoppable. Here's the undeniable reality. A woman who knows her worth doesn't ask for validation. And that's the moment he realized he couldn't manipulate your heart anymore. He couldn't charm you with empty words, couldn't sway you with subtle games, couldn't convince you to lower your standards. Because you had become a force that demanded truth from yourself, and from anyone who dared to stand in your life. He saw it in the way you refused to tolerate anything less than respect. He felt it in the calm strength of your decisions, in the certainty of your now, and the unwavering power of your yes. He watched you rise above his attempts to control or belittle you. And every time he tried to pull back the veil, you stepped further into your light, making it impossible for him to ignore the woman you had become. This isn't about revenge or proving him wrong. This is about self-ownership, courage, and unapologetic power. Your uniqueness doesn't seek approval. It commands it. And that's terrifying to anyone who thrives on predictability, who fears growth, who has never faced the woman who refuses to shrink herself for the comfort of others. When he finally saw you in full force, it wasn't just your beauty or intelligence or success he noticed. It was your unshakable confidence, your unrelenting authenticity, your refusal to be tamed. And that, more than anything, revealed his limitations. He realized something inescapable. The woman standing before him is not the one who bends. She is the one who rises. She is the one who cannot be stopped. Let's be clear, your power isn't loud, it's undeniable. It isn't measured by how much attention you demand, but by how much presence you hold. And that presence, it's magnetic fierce and deeply unsettling for someone who is not prepared to meet it. He realized in the quiet moments, in the subtle shifts, that you were no longer the woman who fit neatly into his expectations. You were the woman who made the world bend to her authenticity, and he had no idea how to respond. Because when a woman embraces her uniqueness, she does something remarkable. She stops apologizing for existing. She stops shrinking herself to make others comfortable. She refuses to settle for anything that diminishes her light. And that refusal terrifies anyone who's been relying on control, fear, or complacency to keep a relationship safe and predictable. He noticed the subtle ways your confidence spilled over, the way you carried yourself, the way your words held weight, the way your presence demanded respect without needing to ask for it. Every small gesture of self-assuredness was like a mirror reflecting his own insecurities back at him. And suddenly, the man who once felt comfortable in the dynamic was confronted with something raw, authentic, and unstoppable. He understood, perhaps for the first time, that he could no longer contain you, define you, or limit your growth. And the truth stung. He wasn't afraid of you. He was afraid of what being with a woman like you demanded of him. And he wasn't ready. Here's the moment that changes everything. He realizes your life doesn't revolve around him anymore. Your dreams, your goals, your joy, they are yours fully unapologetically. And watching you stand so tall, independent and unstoppable, he feels a mixture of awe and fear. He sees the distance between who you are and who he allowed himself to be, that distance. It's a chasm he never thought he'd have to face, because for so long he thrived on comfort. He thrived on predictability. He thrived on the illusion that he could shape the world and the women in it without ever confronting his own limitations. But your evolution shattered that illusion. Every step you take toward yourself exposes the cracks he has long ignored. Every boundary you set highlights his avoidance. Every choice you make with clarity reveals his hesitation, and he feels it deep in his chest, in the pit of his stomach, that he can't follow, can't keep up, and perhaps can't even comprehend. He fears that your independence makes him irrelevant. He fears that your confidence exposes his insecurity. He fears that your unstoppable nature reminds him of every promise he made to himself, but never kept. And here's the undeniable truth. Your power isn't a threat. It's a revelation. It's a revelation of who you are, of who you've become, and of what you refuse to compromise. And that revelation, it terrifies him because he sees the reality he avoided for too long. He can't contain you, and he can't change you. Your uniqueness is unstoppable. Your strength is undeniable. And he knows in that silent, shattering moment that he's been confronted with greatness, and he isn't ready. There's a quiet, almost invisible moment when he realizes the truth. He doesn't just admire your strength, he envies it. And that envy doesn't come from malice, it comes from fear. Fear of what it demands of him, fear of the effort it would take to match your authenticity, your courage, your unwavering self-respect. He sees you rising, and it forces him to confront the version of himself he has avoided for years. Your confidence isn't loud or brash. It's steady, calm, magnetic. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't bend for anyone who isn't willing to meet it with honesty and respect. And watching that, he understands, perhaps too late, that the woman he once knew or thought he knew has evolved into someone extraordinary, someone unstoppable, someone whose life cannot be contained by doubt, by fear, by the limitations of others. And suddenly, he becomes painfully aware he can't control your choices. He can't rewrite your story. He can't dim your brilliance. Every word he once used to manipulate, every excuse he once relied on to justify inaction, every subtle attempt to hold you back, it all falls apart in the presence of your truth. Your presence doesn't just illuminate the room, it illuminates him. And what he sees is uncomfortable, inconvenient, and undeniable. He can no longer hide behind illusions, no longer expect you to stay small for his comfort, no longer maintain the fragile sense of control he's clung to for so long. Your uniqueness terrifies him, not because it's too much, but because it's everything he isn't. And he realizes with a jolt he cannot ignore that you cannot be stopped. Here's the raw truth. The moment he realizes you are unstoppable, he feels a mix of admiration and panic. Admiration for your courage, your clarity, your unwavering refusal to compromise who you are. Panic because that same courage exposes the parts of himself he has neglected, ignored, or refused to develop. He sees you standing in your power, and suddenly he is confronted with a mirror he isn't ready to face, because for so long he thrived in a world where he could remain comfortable while others carried the weight of authenticity. But you carry your truth boldly. You walk with your head high. You make choices that reflect your values, your worth, your brilliance. And that is terrifying to someone who relies on control and avoidance. Every time you speak your mind, set your boundaries, or pursue your dreams, he is reminded of his own compromises. Every time your joy radiates freely, it illuminates his self-imposed limitations. Every time your presence fills the room, it highlights the absence of growth in his own life. And he realizes painfully and unmistakably that he cannot confine you, contain you, or dim your light. Your uniqueness, your fire, your unstoppable nature, these are not negotiable. These are the essence of who you are. And in that moment, he understands the ultimate truth. You are not here to please him. You are not here to soften yourself for his comfort. You are not here to fit into a story he imagined. You are here to rise, to shine, and to become everything you were always meant to be. Here is the final climactic truth. He realizes, in the most undeniable way, that you are unstoppable. This is not a fleeting thought, not a passing fear. It is the undeniable acknowledgement that the woman standing before him cannot be tamed, cannot be diminished, and cannot be contained. Your uniqueness, your brilliance, your courage, they are not optional. They are essential. And he sees it fully with a mixture of awe, regret, and maybe even longing. Because the woman you have become is not the one who waits for permission. She is not the one who seeks approval. She is not the one who compromises her worth to soothe the fragile egos of others. She is the woman who walks in her power, speaks her truth, and refuses to settle for anything less than she deserves. And that, more than anything, terrifies a man who thought he could define your limits. He understands, finally, that you were never meant to be small, quiet, or manageable. He realizes that your fire was never a threat to him. It was a mirror reflecting everything he had avoided in himself. And in that reflection, he sees the truth. You are unstoppable. You are unshakable. You are enough, more than enough, and the world is meant for your brilliance, not for his fear of it. So here is the final unflinching reality. Your uniqueness will always terrify the unprepared. Your strength will always challenge the weak. And your unstoppable self, it will always rise, shine, and claim what is rightfully yours. Stand tall, shine bright, rise fearless, because nothing and no one can stop a woman who knows her worth